So my name is Atif Choudhury, and thank you everybody for taking the time to listen and be part of this. My background, I'm born and raised in London. My family originally from Bangladesh. Um, I am fortunate to be able to talk about this stuff with such confidence, really. I've gone on to be part of two social enterprises that have won a lot of attention. One in Palestine, supporting families in the West Bank to be able to trade through the occupation and the militarization there. And that's gone on to support hundreds and hundreds of people. It's a brilliant story. It's called Zaytun. And the other is called Diversity and Ability. And we are a social enterprise working to provide technology and training, utilizing lived experiences of people who desperately need better support, and that they that go on to be the teachers and the trainers of other people who feel the same way. So, I mean, it might sound a bit cheesy, but I actually feel like I get to exercise my values every day, and I'm sure most of us do as well in some form or another. But I get to do it as a living, which I think is exciting as hell. You know. So diversity. How did I come to do it? Well, I mean, diversity and ability is. I often say is even on a bad day, it's the organization. It's the organization I needed when I was younger. So you know, I'm a dyslexic learner. It doesn't interest me that much to talk about it. It used to be everything, but it sort of doesn't. I'm much more. It's not that I'm not interested in dyslexia. It's rather that I'm super excited about neurodiversity. I'm super excited about what that means in terms of possibilities and voice and agency and what it brings to thought systems. So I talk about that a lot. But how do I come about it is that I spent a long time in my childhood not really talking, certainly not like this, you know, with this kind of confidence. And mostly I struggled to make eye contact with people to my mid-20s. And I was really sure that I had good ideas, but I internalized them. You know, I often had some good jokes, but I wouldn't tell them, you know. And so I was really quite shy at school, particularly. And in essence, I was dealing with a lot of things. Most of it was around dyslexia. And at one point, I think at 13, I sort of looked at a TV program. I thought, oh, that might be what it is. But I had no idea how to express it or go and find out about it. I tried again at a much older time in my life in my 20s. And again, that became harder. It was only until I was 27 that I finally got a diagnosis. And with that space, it was an awfully incredible relief, mentally and socially, an incredible relief to say, look, that explains so much. I guess the challenge for me was saying, well, why was this so hard to find out? And what is the impact of that when it becomes so hard for people to find out? I often think that diagnosis itself is an attention that is often class-based. And what I mean by that is, and it has a mental health ramification, is that folks who find out when they're younger, much younger, usually have advocacy and parents who know about neurodiversity, ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, autism, etc. And they can advocate and they can even, you know, make demands. For a lot of people coming from migrant communities, they're not necessarily exposed to that. They're not necessarily able to advocate for their children in that way. On top of that, there could be a lot of shame and fear that it's going to affect jobs and opportunities and grades, which is understandable. And I mean, and for many sort of viewers watching this, it's understanding, look, I don't think there's a brown person in this country that hasn't had their parents sit them down somewhere between, you know, 12 and 14 and just say these 4 words to them. You know, usually when you're picking your options, you know, the ones you want to do versus the ones that you're almost encouraged to do a bit more. But these 4 words are just simple. Like parents say, brown folks say, you know, you must do more. And when you sort of think about that, it's not just like the end of your childhood, but it's rather an understanding that, yeah, the world isn't designed easily for you. The systemic relationships that we hear talked about more this year, systemic racism, the inequalities. But for most kids, they know that. They know they must do more. They very rarely ask why, you know. And so you'll kind of find yourself saying, so if you know you must do more, why would you share more? Why would you expose vulnerability more? Of course, we've got a responsibility to do it because we open the doors for other people. We normalize the relationships. We've seen mental health as a discussion change over the last 25 years in a radical way. Certainly in my work, we talked about mental health as whether you've got a statement or not, whether you're bipolar or not. Now we talk about well-being and a shared well-being that we will have. The challenge for me was to make sure that actually that well-being conversation could be made available to other people. And it certainly wasn't for me. It certainly wasn't. So I suppose in my background, navigating and masking was all I could do. And the toll it took on my mental health was massive, huge, yeah. And so you sort of realize actually learning isolation, I guess I'll touch on it a little bit later, but learning isolation has an impact on your sense of safety and your emotional safety and your sense of belonging. So whilst you could on one hand say, oh, is it a conversation about dyslexia or is it about a conversation about mental health? Well, really, you can't disconnect the two. So I guess my journey has been learning to connect them two very well, but also playing a responsibility to realize it's an intersectional discussion, and for people going up for social poverty or class, and certainly, what we terminology around BAME, but just for other Black minority groups can feel like they should have the same conversations and the same agency that more traditionally white middle class parents can advocate for.
In the context of that, why does tackling inequalities and inequalities around mental health, why is that so important to you?
I think it's important to everybody. I mean, of course, it's important to me because I think I touched on it a little bit, but I will say it again, is when we talk about what is good for us, when we're brave enough to share lived experiences, we open an invitation to other people, and it's a much more of an authentic place. When an organization does it, an organization works on the pretense that says, we need to be seen to do this. And it's hopefully led by leadership that says, this is not being about being seen to do this, we care about this. But then the same organization is forever battling to say, but our disclosures are so low. What is happening here? And mostly, people are reacting, and there's a reactive space to say, oh, it could be reputation management, it could be mental health costs, it could be long-term work absenteeism in the workplace, it could be even presenteeism. All of these have a financial figure. But they also have a space to say, how do we get this right? Now, the way to get it right is disclosure. But how do you get disclosure going when it's spoken through the lens of the powerful, when it's spoken through the lens of people who feel safe, as I touched on? In essence, you won't get it right. You get it partly right, but you won't get it right. To get it truly right is some of the things that you're seeing these days. Mental health, staff networks, it's a brilliant example. But then the staff networks need to look at themselves, say, who are we made up of? And if we are made up of a discussion that says, well, the Black ethnic minority group is over there, and they don't have this agenda because we're the agenda on disability, that's odd. If the LGBTQ meetings are really made up of LGBTQ members, then where's the allyship? Where's the concern and the care that says actually sharing or not sharing your partners and not be able to share who you love has a mental health consequence for you and yourself and in your workplace? The same thing for me is really about understanding that when people are sharing a hidden difference, they are risking themselves. And when people, especially from BAME communities, are risking themselves, they risk equity, social equity, money. And so often we'll see brown folks being asked to sort of share a lot. And often we'll see groups saying, why are they not sharing more? And then we're trying to say is to understand, well, you risk. I'll give two really good examples I think are relevant. Two famous people. Muhammad Ali, he lost money. He lost his title. He went to prison. He was already famous, but he lost a lot just by sharing his political position. And Colin Kaepernick lost a lot recently. So when we're seeing things, if famous people are sharing their values and they lose a lot, then how do people who are not famous, who don't have that agency, how do they protect things when they're not famous or well known? In essence, they don't. So then we've got to figure out is, if the invitation about mental health disclosure looks like a certain thing, if it looks like say a white middle class man that's able to talk about it, that's a good start. If it looks like women, that's a good start. But it's trying to recognize, do the marginalized voices in the room go, actually, she looks like me, and that couldn't have been easy, but she navigated it. I wonder what made her choose to. To a large extent, I often think, and I talk about my own experiences in this way, that I definitely would not have talked about learning differences, neurodiversity, dyslexia, not at all. In fact, I didn't. I spent years trying to access a diagnosis and years afraid that I might be. And I certainly wouldn't have talked about it in the workplace or the bank that I happened to work in at the time. I think that for most folks, if you are disclosing a hidden difference, you could be doing it because you really appreciate why that company wants to do it. But I suspect that's not always the case. I think more often the case is your KPIs are not performing well, your reports aren't being done well, you're being offered on courses to improve something, but your grammar keeps coming up, or you're in the case of dyslexia or literacy or memory. And so at that point, you're then disclosing because you need to. But are you really having a conversation about dyslexia at that point? You're not. You're having a conversation about job protection. And who on earth has ever had a conversation about job protection that isn't then having a conversation about mental health, mental well-being? It's entirely connected. So what we've got to figure out is, are we excited about the diversity of thought? Are we excited about lived experiences? Are we showcasing them because we know it isn't a deficit model or a nice to do political or cultural image, but rather it's because we need the diversity of thought. We need lived experiences to show us how to get through things. And we're always better when we do that. Not just because it's the right thing to do, which should be enough, to be honest, but it's because it informs our process, do you know? When we speak and invite and engage with sincerity the most marginalized person in the room, we'll probably find out that they're not the most marginalized person in the room, that everybody else is now engaging in a way to show us they've been hiding a lot, and it's taken its toll at times. So for me, I guess it's that way of saying, look, mental health and well-being belongs to everybody, and it's great, it's fantastic, in fact, over the last 25 years that we've seen this change. It's been pioneering a lot of good work. We've seen Mental Health First Aid England really brought that attention to and folks like yourselves, really, and even this kind of conversation. It's one that I couldn't imagine 15 years ago, that I would be participating in or being asked to do.
What change do you want to see?
Oh, there's so many. but I guess if we're talking about mental health, really in context of what we're talking about here is to recognise, look, lived experiences, and I say that, I can't say that enough. They are the asset in the room, you know. And people pay for consultancy so much and spend a lot of money, not just asking, look, what works for you? For diversity and ability, crikey, we were shortlisted as Inclusive Company of the Year last year. We win awards for the disability employment gap and et cetera, to challenge it, you know. And 85% of my team self-disclose with a protected characteristic of disability. That's a lot of folks. But my point is, none of that matters to me. What matters to me is, can I do this job well without the assets of these lived experiences? The answer is no, I can't. I can't do it. I need the diversity of thought. I need those experiences to show us how this technology doesn't work well enough, and how human-centered approaches and human-centered innovation makes it matter more. That this isn't technology, these are just tools. They're just tools. What makes this work is people sincerely saying, actually, yeah, this is useful for me. But the way you talk about it, the way you approach it, really gives me light, because I can see your life connects to mine. Listen, I mean, the most disabling thing on earth is attitudes, right? It's the attitudes we have about ourselves mostly. You know, that can be very disabling. And it's also the attitudes that people have about people they've never even met, you know, and the speed in which we pigeonhole people. But you apply social economics to that, the idea that people don't have agency or they risk finances when they speak out. It's difficult. We can talk about law and legislation around access, and we should, because it's important. It's a big part of this year's Disability History Month, access. But we should also be talking about impact. What is the impact of somebody sharing What is the impact of somebody not sharing? What is the impact when then somebody has mental health and they're able to work in a place that gives them leave? What is the impact of mental health when they work in a place that says they haven't really been promoted, they don't read so well, and the mental health consequence means they don't get paid when they're on leave? Those are different things. Whilst the mental health might be the same, the impact is completely different. So I guess it's recognizing that. I suppose for me, it's helping organizations and perspectives, whether they're policy leaders or they're just, or not just, but just managers of people. It's understanding that there's a powerful role there that says you get to strike a change and you get to be humbled by these lived experiences because it's informing your process. It's showing you, it's inviting you to engage and show. But you've got to anticipate that people won't necessarily do it. You can't just say, my door's open, they should walk through it, or they can. Your job is to go to people, whether you're a policy leader, a CEO, or a manager, or even a parent. Your job is to go to people to say, look, it's probably not easy to talk about this. So how do I make it easier? And what do I do that makes it about inclusion rather than job protection?